Saudi Arabia is burning hundreds of millions of dollars to completely take over Formula One. We're talking about a proper full-scale invasion that's made them the single biggest contributor to F1's finances in just 4 years. The kingdom didn't even host a Grand Prix until 2021, and now they're reportedly trying to buy the entire bloody sport for over $20 billion. That's not wanting a seat at the table, that's wanting to own the restaurant, kitchen and car park. So, how did F1 become so ridiculously dependent on a country that was basically irrelevant to motorsport until 5 minutes ago? This story involves missile attacks during race weekends, drivers holding emergency meetings at 2:30 in the morning, and enough money to make your head spin. The numbers are absolutely bonkers and show just how aggressively Saudis approached this takeover. They've dropped $550 million for a 10-year hosting deal. That's $55 million per race, more than some entire F1 teams have spent in their existence. To put that in perspective, most traditional European circuits pay F1 hosting fees in the 15 to 30 million range. Saudi's paying almost double that just to get their race on the calendar. Then, Aramco signed what's essentially the biggest sponsorship deal in F1 history, £378 million over 10 years as F1's global partner. That works out to nearly $40 million annually, making other major sponsors look like they're bringing lunch money. You literally cannot watch a Formula One race without seeing Aramco logos more than the actual drivers. They're on barriers, timing screens, car liveries, driver overalls, and probably tattooed on Stefano Domenicali's forehead by now. They're also title sponsor of Aston Martin's F1 team, a proper mouthful that forces commentators to say Aramco every time they mention the team. Meanwhile, Saudi's public investment fund bought a 20.5% stake in Aston Martin's car company for hundreds of millions more and invested in McLaren Group through a consortium deal in 2021. That's two teams with Saudi money flowing through them, creating multiple pressure points for influence. The McLaren investment is particularly clever because it gives Saudi interests a voice in another storied constructor, while Bahrain's Mumtalakat Fund remains the majority shareholder. They're building a permanent circuit at Qiddiya near Riyadh to replace the Jeddah street track. Not just any circuit, but part of a massive motorsport theme park that'll make Silverstone look like a village fair.
Qiddiya city is a whole city built on a singular philosophy.
This isn't just a racing circuit. F1 cars will literally blast past roller coasters and water parks as they lap the circuit. The whole Qiddiya project includes Six Flags theme parks, luxury hotels, concert venues, and over 300 planned attractions with the F1 circuit as the centerpiece. It's billed as the home of Saudi motorsport and should open by 2027. Add it up, and Saudi Arabia became the single biggest financial contributor to Formula One despite not being on the F1 map until 2021. Crucially, Saudi Arabia has also invested in building the stepping stones young drivers need on the path to F1, because nothing is cooler than owning the thing and winning it at the same time. In 2024, the kingdom established its own FIA-sanctioned Formula 4 Championship, an entry-level single-seater series aimed at local and regional junior drivers. Unlike most F4 series elsewhere, F4 Saudi was centrally run, with all cars prepared by a single organization. Despite initial hopes for 20-plus cars on the grid, the series attracted around 15 drivers per round, a mix of Saudi Gulf locals and international up-and-comers. A few drivers from Saudi are beginning to make their mark at the junior level, even if none are yet household names. On the Formula Racing side, Omar Alderayyan and Abdulaziz Abazanada have shown potential in F4, with Alderayyan notably securing a midfield finish against international drivers in the feeder series. They represent the first wave of Saudi teens transitioning from karts to cars under the new programs.
Well, if sport washing gonna increase my GDP by 1%, and then I will continue doing sport washing.
This whole operation is the brainchild of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia and mastermind behind Vision 2030, an absolutely bonkers transformation plan. Saudi currently makes most money from oil, but MBS knows that won't last forever, so he's throwing oil wealth at literally everything else: sports, technology, tourism, entertainment. The goal is transforming Saudi Arabia from an oil-dependent kingdom into a futuristic entertainment and business hub. Here's the thing, 70% of Saudis are under 40. That's a massive young population needing entertainment. Sports fit perfectly, and F1 reaches about 1 billion people while making Saudi look modern and exciting. F1 is just one piece of an insane sports spending spree. Saudi bought Newcastle United for $400 million, created Live Golf with $2 billion to poach golfers.
I don't care. I have 1% growth of GDP from sport, and I'm aiming for another 1.5%. Call it whatever you want. We're going to get that 1.5%.
By 2023, they took over 4 top Saudi clubs and went absolutely wild in the transfer market. They lured Cristiano Ronaldo with a contract worth around $200 million per year. That's more than most F1 drivers make in their entire careers. Then came Karim Benzema, Neymar Jr., and a parade of other superstars with equally ridiculous salaries. The summer 2023 transfer window alone saw Saudi clubs spend $875 million on foreign players, more than every league except the Premier League. They basically forced every other league to compete with Saudi money or lose their best players. Live Golf was even more aggressive, backed by roughly $2 billion from the PIF. They poached the biggest names from the PGA Tour with guaranteed contracts that made traditional tournament winnings look like pocket change. The operation was so overwhelming that by 2023 it forced the PGA Tour into a merger, completely upending professional golf's century-old structure. Combat sports got the same treatment. Saudi hosts multiple high-profile boxing matches by offering site fees that other countries can't match. They've been sniffing around WWE when it was exploring a sale. Tennis, wrestling, esports. If it's got global reach and prestige, Saudi's throwing money at it with the same overwhelming financial force. Timing is suspicious though. The sports investment ramped up right after the Khashoggi scandal, making it look like a massive PR operation to distract from human rights issues.
Saudi Arabia believes in many of the principles of human rights.
Here's where things get uncomfortable. While becoming F1's biggest sugar daddy, Saudi was doing some absolutely wild stuff back home. Saudi continues having one of the worst human rights records globally, but F1 decided none of this matters as long as the check's clear. They launched We Racers One Equality Initiative in 2020, then immediately started taking millions from a country where basic human rights don't exist. The hypocrisy is thick enough to cut with a knife. Lewis Hamilton's been one of few drivers with balls to say something, and he hasn't held back. When F1 first went to Jeddah in 2021, Hamilton said he felt uncomfortable being there and duty-bound to speak about human rights issues. There's a lot that needs to change, and I think our sport needs to do more, Hamilton said pointedly. Hamilton backed up his words with symbolism, wearing rainbow flag pride helmets at races in Saudi and Qatar as direct protests against anti-LGBTQ policies. Sebastian Vettel was more subtle but equally pointed before retiring. Vettel wore shirts with rainbow colours and same love messages during race weekends, focusing on encouraging positive change rather than direct criticism. The safety concerns reached a breaking point during the 2022 missile strike incident.
A new experience for the viewer, for the drivers, anybody who will come to the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix in Jeddah.
Jeddah is marketed as the fastest street circuit in history, and it probably is. Drivers hit over 320 kilometers per hour on a street track, which is absolutely wild. Most street circuits are slow and twisty. Monaco and Singapore are good examples of it. Jeddah is the complete opposite, a high-speed death trap with barriers instead of gravel. Drivers have been moaning about blind corners everywhere, barely any overtaking spots, and the whole thing feeling like it was designed by someone who's never watched F1. But the track layout isn't even the craziest part. In March 2022, Yemen's Houthi rebels fired missiles that hit an Aramco oil depot 10 kilometers from the circuit. Drivers could see black smoke rising from their cockpits during practice. an actual missile attack during an F1 weekend. The drivers lost their minds. Emergency meetings went until 2:30 in the morning, basically deciding whether to pack up and get out. Some wanted to boycott entirely. Lewis Hamilton said they shouldn't be there with missiles flying around. There were even unconfirmed reports floating around that teams were told they couldn't leave the country if the race didn't go ahead, though F1 denies that particular bit of madness. After hours of talks and strong assurances about safety, they stayed and raced anyway. The Grand Prix went ahead as scheduled, proving nothing stops the F1 money machine, not even active warfare next door. But here's the thing that really gets me. Even Hamilton and Vettel raced anyway. What choice do they have? F1's locked into these contracts, teams need the money, and individual drivers can't really boycott without destroying their careers. It's a perfect trap. Saudi money is so embedded in F1 that resistance becomes almost impossible. The Williams story perfectly shows why teams find Saudi money irresistible. Williams was once a dominant powerhouse, 9-time Constructors' champions who ruled the 90s, but decades of underinvestment brought them to their knees in the most brutal way possible. By 2019, they hit absolute rock bottom, scoring just 1 point all season. 1 point! The team finances were in complete tatters, and deputy boss Claire Williams ultimately had to sell the family business in 2020 just to save the team from extinction. When new owners took over, they inherited a team frozen in time. James Vowles was stunned to find Williams' facilities stuck 20 years out of date. Much of the factory was literally running on 1990s-era infrastructure. Years of zero investment meant they were trying to compete in modern F1 with technology from the dial-up internet era. Now contrast that with Aston Martin's transformation. Lawrence Stroll bought the struggling Force India operation in 2018 and opened the wallet like a fuel pump. The team now has a world-class campus at Silverstone, complete with modern wind tunnels and simulators. Stroll signed champion Fernando Alonso and even lured legendary designer Adrian Newey for 2025. Claire Williams watches that rise, knowing Williams might have been the team rejuvenated if they'd secured backing on Stroll's scale. That's why Saudi money is so tempting. When you're offering cash that can transform a team overnight, even principled owners start doing arithmetic.
It owns its IP on its most important entertainment product.
Here's the uncomfortable truth about how Liberty Media got caught in their own success. When they bought F1 in 2017, the sport had 2 Middle Eastern races. Today it has 4 Gulf State Grand Prix locked into long-term contracts. That's 1/6 of the entire calendar anchored by authoritarian regimes. These 4 races alone provide a huge chunk of guaranteed income that's basically become the financial foundation of F1's calendar. Walk away from those deals and Liberty would blow a massive hole in the sport's revenues. Saudi's race comes with that mental 10-year contract worth about 50 or 55 million per year. Here's the killer detail. Liberty Media is a public company. Abandoning lucrative contracts like Saudi's would invite shareholders' fury and a stock price implosion. Any attempt to suddenly go ethical would crash headlong into investor pressure. They built a structural dependency on regimes with deep pockets, making any moral stand economically devastating. Instead, we get PR spin about how F1 can be a force for positive change by racing in places like Saudi Arabia. It's obvious corporate nonsense. There's no evidence that Grand Prix racing changes oppressive regimes. The reality is, Liberty puts payday before morals, and everyone knows it. Aramco, responsible for about 4% of global emissions since 1965, is now main sponsor of F1's carbon neutral by 2030 plan. But F1's managing to keep a straight face about it. They talk about sustainable fuels and carbon neutrality while taking hundreds of millions from a company that's been pumping CO2 into the atmosphere for decades. The cognitive gymnastics required to make that make sense must be absolutely exhausting. In January 2023, Bloomberg reported Saudi's PIF explored buying Formula One outright for well over $20 billion. Liberty Media bought F1 for $4.4 billion in 2017, so Saudi was offering 4 times that amount. Liberty told them no, they're not selling a money-printing machine, but the report said PIF remains interested should Liberty change their mind. Saudi basically said, "Name your price, we're ready whenever you're ready to sell." Even Mohammed bin Sulayem, the FIA president, warned on Twitter that 20 billion sounded inflated and could jack up costs for promoters and fans. The sport's own governing body questioned whether Saudi money might be bad for F1. Saudi's plan B is buying actual F1 teams, and they're not being subtle about it. Prince Khalid bin Sultan Al Faisal said in 2025 that owning a Formula One team could be the next step, treating it as much business venture as prestige project. Given F1's growth, it could happen soon, he said, adding that they do it to make money out of it, refreshingly honest about the commercial motivations alongside the prestige factor. The strongest links are to Aston Martin, which makes perfect sense given the existing web of Saudi money already flowing through the team. Aramco's title sponsorship and the PIF's 20.5% stake in the car company create natural entry points for deeper involvement. When Aston Martin's parent company started looking to sell its stake in the F1 team in March 2025, hiring Rain Group to find a buyer, rumours immediately pointed to Saudi's PIF as the prime candidate. The speculation got wild quickly. Italian sports daily Gazzetta dello Sport claimed the PIF was determined to buy the team outright, not just the minority stake being sold, but 100% ownership of the entire F1 operation. Even crazier, they reported Saudi might try to lure Max Verstappen away from Red Bull with a $300 million package to drive for a Saudi-owned Aston Martin. That's the kind of stupid money that could completely reshape the driver market. Aston Martin firmly denied these reports, insisting there were no plans beyond the existing minority stake sale and no agreements to upsell their current driver lineup. But the very fact that these rumours exist and spread so quickly shows how seriously people take Saudi's F1 ambitions. There have been whispers about other teams too, whether Renault might eventually sell Alpine despite official denials, whether any of the smaller teams struggling financially might be tempted by Saudi money that could transform their operations overnight.
Sport's never been in a better place, and I believe if it ain't broke, you don't need to fix it. So
here's what nobody wants to say. F1 can't resist Saudi money because they're offering amounts that make other sponsors look like pocket change. The contracts aren't just big, they're long-term. F1's locked into Saudi through at least 2027. Aramco's sponsorship runs until 2030. Saudi's buying long-term influence and dependence. F1 has become structurally dependent on controversial money. Teams rely on Saudi sponsorship. NEOM, that mental line-shaped city project, is already title sponsor of McLaren's Formula E and Extreme E teams, despite not even being finished yet. The futuristic NEOM project literally carries McLaren's name as NEOM McLaren in electric racing, broadcasting the Saudi brand across multiple motorsport series. Saudi's public investment fund also ploughed $550 million into McLaren itself back in 2021. The calendar depends on controversial host fees, and the sport's growth strategy is built around markets that pay stupid money regardless of politics. The Formula Equal proposal is particularly interesting because it would align perfectly with Saudi's narrative about social change and modernization. Former BAR boss Craig Pollock was reportedly in talks with a Gulf country, widely suspected to be Saudi Arabia, to fund a proposed 50-50 male-female F1 team. A gender-equal team would be exactly the kind of progressive image Saudi wants to project, conveniently distracting from actual policies back home while scoring massive PR points. So, looking at the trajectory, Saudi influence in F1 is only going to grow. Saudi will probably own at least one F1 team within years. The Qiddiya circuit will replace Jeddah. More Saudi companies will follow Aramco as major sponsors. The financial dependency will only deepen. Eventually, Saudi might get another crack at buying the whole sport. Liberty won't own F1 forever, and when they sell, Saudi will probably be first in line with an offer nobody else can match. The question isn't whether Saudi will become more influential, that's guaranteed. The question is whether F1 can maintain any independence while taking their money. Will we actually see the sale of F1 to the Saudis? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.